J Jinx!
Truck stop!
JJ Jinx here with a video about my collection of Stockmans. Or is it Stockmen? And here they are. Well, sort of. Some of these are technically not Stockmen. Let's talk about that. So, a Stockman knife has an interesting history to it. I won't go into all the details. There are other YouTubers that do so. But basically, in the 1800s, the Industrial Revolution was not quite in full swing yet, and cutlery was just sort of finding its foothold in American manufacturing. A lot of cutlery was actually imported from England and Germany and a smattering of other places, but mostly them. And at some point, a marketer realized, hey, America's got a very unique market for us. Why don't we come up with a type of knife just for them? Thus, the Stockman was born. I wanted to make this video like a long time ago, but then I cut my nails. Then time went by, I procrastinated, I got lazy, or I just didn't have time, and I cut my nails again, but this time I kept my thumbnail intact on purpose to make this video, because these classic folders require a thumbnail to properly open. At the conclusion of the video, I will be cutting this nail off because it's really weird to have one nail not cut, and I just haven't gotten used to it, so it's gonna go. So the features of a Stockman are the following. Most of the time they have this kind of serpentine curvature to them, which I think is pretty visually appealing. And they are almost always three-bladed. And the types of blades are almost always the same. A lot of almosts. The most common configuration that I've found is a long main clip point blade, a medium-sized sheep's foot blade, and a small to medium-sized spay blade. This particular Stockman knife comes to us from Rough Rider. I actually got this in one of the Smoky Mountain Knife Works Mystery Monthly boxes, and I remember noting that the jigging pattern on the synthetic handle kind of looks like a bunch of earthworms. So that's the basic anatomy of a Stockman. Oftentimes, you'll see them looking like this. The curvature is a little more subdued. It's not so serpentine, but it's there. And notice that the bolsters are a little more squared off than they are on this piece. This is still considered a Stockman though, even though the handle shape is different. And this one is by Uncle Henry, which is made by Schrade. And we have a little bit of a difference in the configuration. See, the spay blade has been sort of in the process of, I don't want to say it's being phased out, but it's kind of being replaced with a lot of modern Stockman knives because people don't really use them for the original intended purpose. So more and more often I see them with pen blades instead, which is a little bit ironic because pen blades are also not really used for their original intended purpose anymore these days. Now this Uncle Henry version is kind of a new lineup. They just put out these Stagalon 2.0 handle knives. It's a new version of their synthetic stag scales. I don't know what makes it any more special than the original Stagalon, but I think it just kind of looks better. It looks a little more real. There's some more depth to it. A little more natural looking. I think it looks fantastic, and I had to have one. I had to wait for this one though, because like it literally just came out, and when I placed the order, it said it would be a few weeks away, and there were other models of the Uncle Henry knife in Stagalon 2.0 that were available to ship immediately, but I guess this one was kind of popular. Now let's talk about a couple of the strange variations that we may see. Sometimes a knife isn't even called a Stockman, yet it's got a lot of the features. Take this one on the left, for example. It's got the serpentine curvature, rounded bolsters, but it only has 2 blades, and they're both pivoting on the same side. So a little bit of a variation. Oh god, I just tore my thumbnail right off. I might not have to clip it after all, just make the video. This one's a little bit tight, but it's got a pen blade and the usual clip point blade. I don't know if this scale material is called anything in particular, but I think it looks great. That very dark kind of chocolate brown and the way it's jigged, that looks fantastic. This knife is actually made from the 70s all the way through the 90s by, I think it was United Cutlery. So it says Sharp on it, but, well, the history is that these were made for Sears and sold in Sears stores. Now, interestingly, on the packaging, this model was called a Trapper, which, well, to be fair, Trappers do have 2 blades on the same pivot most of the time. There are 3-bladed Trappers out there. But this, I wouldn't call it that. I would just call it a 2-bladed Stockman. So what makes a Stockman a Stockman? Is it the handle shape? Well, according to this knife, no. It would be the blade configuration, because on this one, it's different. As we saw with this knife, the blade configuration is also different, and yet it's also a Stockman. But the handle shape is different. It's so confusing. So, let me get rid of that nail. I'll show you another example of a knife that I would call a Stockman, because it's got the handle shape. Instead of 3 blades, it only has 2, and they're both exactly the same. This comes to us also from Rough Rider, and they call it the Moose. So, that's kind of the trend. Change up the blades, maybe the number of them, where they pivot from, the type of blade they are, and give it a different name. And you see a lot of examples of that, but I don't know. I kind of feel like it's a Stockman with 2 blades again. So to me, what makes a Stockman is the shape of the handle, and I guess these count too, although I would call this a 2-bladed Congress blade, because it's Congress blades that usually have this bowed shape to the handle. It's all so confusing and arbitrary anymore, isn't it? Anyway, on with the collection. This is the Easy Money Stockman from Rough Rider, and again, all these Rough Rider knives I got from their mystery boxes. This one has the clip point blade, and yes, there are bits of real US currency in the acrylic handles. We got the spay blade and the sheep's foot blade. What makes this particular knife a little bit different from the other ones is that the blades all have half stops, which I actually kind of like. Very crisp and clean walk and talk on this model. This one I also happen to get from a Smoky Mountain Knife Works package. It's the Boker Tree brand. I don't remember what they called this handle material, but it is a smooth bone with like a mocha coloration to it. It had some kind of name like that, some kind of confectionery name. Now this one is a larger model. They got, graphics printed or emblazoned onto the blade, which I don't particularly like. And we have a very thick spay blade on this side, and also a pretty thick sheep's foot blade on this side. I like this knife because the blade stock is nice and thin and slicey, but it is big. I think my size preference is something more along the lines of this size, but they make them even smaller. Now this knife and I have quite a bit of history. I acquired it at an antique mall somewhere, I think in Virginia, for about $2. And based on how it looks, I thought that I recognized it might have been a colonial knife, and indeed it is. As you can see on the Tang stamp, the blades are very worn. This has been sharpened just tons of times, but whoever sharpened it did a pretty good job, because I mean it's nice and sharp. All the blades are, and you got your little sheep's foot blade and a little what looks to be probably a pen blade. It may have been a spay blade at some point, but obviously it's heavily used, and the scales are also very, very worn. This knife was loved by somebody, so I attempted to clean it up. That was a video I never put out because it didn't go very well. I do have some before shots that I took, and this knife is looking a lot better than it did, and I ended up just dropping it into a cup full of that corrosion remover stuff. And I was a little concerned about the bolsters because it showed some obvious signs of oxidation, and that corrosion remover just ate the bolsters. I mean, look at that. There's just big chunks of it missing. So that nickel plating is long gone, and then what looks like copper underneath is oxidized, and then the corrosion remover stuff just removed the oxidized portion. These bolsters are done for. This one still looks nice though. There's not much wrong with just that one. And also, when I pulled it out of the corrosion remover, the spring just fell apart. So there must have been a pit that kind of worked the corrosion away, and then I didn't even try to open the blade. I literally just pulled it out, and this was on the bottom of the cup. So that back spring is broken, and it's not really worth fixing because I'd have to take the whole thing apart. I would want to put on new bolsters, and it's just not worth it. This thing's too old, too far gone, and I feel kind of bad because whoever the previous owner was, they obviously carried this and used it and really liked it, and now here I am just saying, it's worthless. Well, because it is, but somebody loved it, so I'm keeping it. So that's my collection of Stockman and Stockman-like knives. I don't necessarily have a favorite. There are things that I like, and there are things that I dislike about all of them. And if I had to rank them, I would actually probably put this one as my #1 choice for the size and the quality. Rough Rider did a great job on this thing. Ease of opening, and but what I would really like is to have a Stockman knife like this one, but with the shiny, smooth bolsters of this one. I don't really care too much for this groove that they like to put into their bolsters, but also with the half stops of this one. I thought that I would really like this Uncle Henry one, but the squared off bolsters don't really do it for me. I would much prefer the serpentine handle with the rounded bolsters. Plus, the quality on this one is just not as great. I mean, I could polish the blades a little bit better, but it's a little bit weak on the walk and talk. Well, when I say weak, I mean it's there's something about it that's not pleasing. It doesn't really snap into the slip joint. The Boker Tree brand one is probably the highest quality one that I have, but it's just too big, and I don't like that printed thing on the blade. I'd rather carry one in a different color too, if I had the choice. I mean, I'm a fan of that 1970s brown, just not really this exact kind of brown. I just don't like it. It could be a better color. Now, these old Sears knives are pretty neat. They made a bunch of different ones, all with these same synthetic stag handles. There was a lot of confusion about what exact model was made when, by who, and where. Well, not by who. It's all made by Colonial, I think. But, well, anyway, the full story is that Sears placed in absolutely enormous order. They put these in like all of their stores, and the knife maker started to run out of parts, so they started to incorporate blades from other lineups. So sometimes the model numbers will be a little bit different from knife to knife. Like this one says model 270. Sometimes it would say Colonial instead of Sharp, and it would be a different number. So there's a lot of collectability there, but good luck navigating what you actually have. Because like I said, they made these for like 30 years, and well, That would be quite an adventure to get the full collection of that one. If you know of a knife that has the half stops of this one, funky cool scales like this one, and shiny bolsters like this one, let me know in the comments. I've considered getting one by case. I just can't seem to get past their quality control issues. I'm just afraid I would get one and it would have like horrible gaps in it, and blade play and all the other things that I've noticed that they've been prone to anymore these days, and I just don't want to deal with that. You know, I don't want to spend that much money on a knife and then, like, hate it. But I've been saying for a long time, I've been wanting to get I've been wanting to get into carrying these classic folders, and it took me a while to kind of get used to having a knife that had multiple blades on it. And I found myself kind of rotating between them mostly arbitrarily, but I kind of am falling for the shape of the Stockman, the feel of the Stockman, the slimness of it for having 3 blades, and I also appreciate the engineering of the 3-bladed Stockmans, because one quirky feature is, you notice there are only 2 tracks, but how do you get 3 blades on 2 tracks? Well, you probably saw it there. You have, in this case, the spay blade and the clip point blade on opposite tracks, but the sheep's foot blade on the same track as the spay blade, so they have to share that space. But one of them has to move around the other one because they overlap, and you can see that when you look down on it from above. Notice how the sheep's foot blade kind of kicks off to the side a little bit, and that's how it's able to fit in there. It actually goes in between the 2 other blades. See? Just like that. It's a neat thing because that requires precise tolerances. It's a neat engineering feat, but sometimes it doesn't quite work out. So in this example, it's kicked a little bit too far over, and it's actually rubbing against the clip point blade, and you can see there's actually a mark on the blade right here where it's rubbing against it. So that's no good. But they're not all like that. This one, for example, I don't see any signs of rubbing. Same thing from the Boker knife. It's just one of the quirks of the Stockman. So those are my Stockmen, I'm going to choose to call it. Thanks for watching. This has been JJ Jinx Truck Stop Knives.